Damian Cross buried his wife 3 years ago. The casket was closed, the fire too hot to leave anything recognizable. He mourned, he raged, he moved on, or so he told himself. But on a freezing Chicago afternoon, stopped at a red light with murder on his mind, Damian sees the impossible. Ivy, alive, exhausted, selling roses on a corner in the rain, and beside her, clinging to her worn coat, a little boy with Damian's own gray eyes staring back at him through the downpour. If you want to see how far revenge, resurrection, and redemption can take a man who thought he'd lost everything, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down in sheets, turning Chicago's streets into rivers of oil-slicked asphalt and brake lights. Inside the armored black SUV, Damian Cross sat in the back seat, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth, his fingers drumming a steady, dangerous rhythm against his knee. The phone call he'd received 20 minutes ago still echoed in his skull like a death knell. There's a rat in the organization, not just any rat, someone close. Someone who'd been feeding information to the Flanagan crew for months, maybe longer. Someone who knew where the money flowed, where the bodies were buried, where the real power lived. Damian Cross didn't tolerate betrayal. In his world, loyalty was currency, and treachery was a debt paid in blood. Boss. The driver, a broad-shouldered man named Vincent, glanced in the rearview mirror. Light's about to change. Damian didn't respond. His mind was elsewhere, running through names, faces, possibilities. Who would be stupid enough, or desperate enough, to cross him? He'd built his empire on fear and respect in equal measure. He'd crushed rivals, absorbed their territories, eliminated threats before they could fully form. The Cross organization wasn't just powerful, it was inevitable. And yet, someone had dared. The light stayed red. Traffic crawled on the cross street, a blur of umbrellas and hurried pedestrians trying to escape the November cold. Damian's gaze drifted absently to the sidewalk, his thoughts already turning to the interrogation he'd conduct later that night. He had 3 suspects. By morning, he'd have answers. And then he saw her. Time didn't just slow, it stopped. Across the street, barely visible through the rain-streaked window, a woman stood on the corner. She wore a thin jacket that had seen better years, her dark hair plastered to her face, her hands clutching a bundle of roses wrapped in cellophane. She looked tired, bone-tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from too many shifts, too many sleepless nights, too many years of running. But it was her face that froze Damian's heart mid-beat. Ivy. Ivy Hale. His wife. His dead wife. The woman he'd buried 3 years ago after a car fire had consumed her vehicle on a lonely stretch of highway outside the city. The woman whose closed casket he'd stood over, unable to say goodbye to a face he'd never see again. The woman whose ghost had haunted him through 1,000 sleepless nights, whose memory he'd tried to drown in work, in violence, in the cold mathematics of power. She was standing 20 feet away, selling flowers in the rain. Damian's hand shot to the door handle, but he didn't move. Couldn't move. His entire body had locked up, every muscle rigid with shock. It couldn't be her. It was impossible. But then she shifted, turning slightly to hand a rose to a passing businessman, and Damian saw her profile. The delicate slope of her nose, the curve of her jaw, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear even when it was soaked and tangled. Gestures he'd memorized 1,000 times over. Gestures that belonged to Ivy and no one else. Boss? Vincent's voice seemed to come from miles away. You okay? Damian didn't answer. His gaze had shifted to the small figure beside Ivy. A boy. Maybe 3 years old, bundled in a coat too big for his frame, his small hand gripping Ivy's leg as he pressed against her for warmth. His hair was dark, his face round with the softness of early childhood. And his eyes, even from this distance, even through the rain, were gray. The same steel-gray eyes that stared back at Damian every time he looked in a mirror. The light turned green. Boss, we gotta move. Stay here, Damian said, his voice rough, almost unrecognizable to his own ears. What? I said stay here. Damian's hand was already on the door handle, pushing it open before Vincent could respond. The rain hit him like a slap, cold and immediate, soaking through his suit jacket in seconds. He didn't care. He stepped into the street, ignoring the honking horns, the angry shouts of drivers swerving around him. His eyes were locked on Ivy, on the impossible woman who'd returned from the dead without warning, without explanation. She didn't see him. She was focused on the boy, crouching down to adjust his collar, her lips moving in words Damien couldn't hear over the rain and traffic. The boy nodded, his small face serious, and Ivy stood again, offering her roses to passers-by who ignored her, hurrying past with their heads down. Damien reached the curb. Ivy looked up. Their eyes met. For one suspended moment, the world fell away. The rain, the traffic, the cold. There was only Ivy's face, pale and stricken, her lips parting in shock. Recognition flooded her features, followed immediately by something else. Terror, pure, unfiltered terror. "No," she whispered, the word lost in the storm, but visible on her lips. And then she ran. She grabbed the boy's hand and bolted, roses scattering across the wet pavement, petals crushed under rushing feet. Damien's instincts kicked in before his mind could catch up. He lunged forward, but Ivy was already disappearing into the crowd, pulling the child behind her. "Ivy!" His voice cracked like a whip, but she didn't stop. Damien shoved through the pedestrians, his eyes tracking Ivy's dark hair as she dodged around a corner into an alley. He ran, his dress shoes slipping on the wet concrete, his breath coming hard and fast. When he rounded the corner, the alley was empty except for a dumpster and a fire escape leading to the buildings above. She was gone. Damien stood there, rain pouring down his face, his chest heaving. His mind raced through impossible explanations, each one more insane than the last. Ivy was alive. She'd have been alive for 3 years, and she'd hidden a child, his child, from him. "Boss!" Vincent appeared at the mouth of the alley, breathless, his hand inside his jacket where his gun rested. What the hell just happened? Damien didn't answer immediately. He was staring at the scattered roses on the ground, their petals already turning to pulp in the rain. He bent down, picked one up, turned it over in his hands. "Find Cole," he said quietly. "Cole Mercer?" "Now." Vincent hesitated, reading the expression on Damien's face. The cold, lethal focus that appeared when Damien Cross stopped being a man and became something else entirely. "Yes, sir." Cole Mercer arrived at Damien's penthouse an hour later, his coat dripping water onto the polished hardwood floor. He was a lean, angular man in his late 30s, with sharp features and sharper eyes that missed nothing. He'd been Damien's right hand for nearly a decade, the one man Damien trusted without reservation. Until tonight. "You wanted to see me," Cole said, shaking rain from his hair. Damien stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his posture rigid. He didn't turn around. "Tell me about Ivy's accident," Damien said. Silence. Cole's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "That was 3 years ago, Damien. Why, tell me." Damien's voice was soft, almost gentle. It was the most dangerous tone he possessed. Cole shifted his weight. "Car fire, Highway 53, just past the county line." "You know this. We went over it 100 times. The accelerant, the closed casket, the body was never identified," Damien interrupted. "The fire was too hot. Forensics said—" "I know what forensics said." Damien finally turned, his gray eyes locking onto Cole's. "I want to know what you saw." Cole held his gaze. "I saw a burned-out wreck and a wedding ring in the ashes. Same as you. And you never questioned it? Never thought it was too clean, too convenient?" "Damien, what is this about?" Damien crossed the room in 3 strides, moving with the predatory grace that made men twice his size step back. He stopped inches from Cole, close enough to see the tension in his jaw. "I saw Ivy today," Damien said. "On the street. Alive." Cole's face went blank. "That's impossible." "That's what I thought." Damien tilted his head. "And yet there she was, selling roses in the rain, with a boy who looks exactly like me." For the first time in years, Damien saw Cole's composure crack. It was subtle, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible hitch in his breathing, but it was there. "You knew," Damien said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Damien, you knew." Not a question anymore. A statement of fact, cold and immutable. Cole took a step back, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. "Let me explain." Don't! Damien's hand shot out, gripping Cole's wrist with enough force to make bone creak. Don't insult me with explanations. Not yet. Right now you're going to tell me where she is. I can't do that. Then you're going to die in this room. The two men stood locked together, the air between them electric with violence. Finally, Cole exhaled. Joliet, he said quietly. South Side. She's been there for 2 years. Damien released him, stepping back. You've been watching her. Keeping her safe. From who? Cole's jaw tightened. From you. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Damien's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the atmosphere, a coldness that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. Explain, he said. Cole straightened, meeting Damien's eyes. The accident wasn't an accident. It was supposed to kill her, kill them both. Who ordered it? I don't know, but it came from inside. Someone close enough to know her route, her schedule, her habits. Someone who wanted her gone and wanted it to look natural. And you helped her disappear. I staged the crash, made it look real, got her out of the city before anyone could finish the job. Cole's voice was steady now, no longer defensive. I've been sending her money every month, keeping tabs, making sure no one finds her. While letting me believe she was dead. Yes. For 3 years. Yes. Damien turned away, his hands clenching into fists. The whiskey glass on the nearby table shattered in his grip, blood and liquor mixing on his palm. He didn't seem to notice. Did she ask you to do this? His voice was barely audible. No, she wanted to tell you. I convinced her it was too dangerous, that if you knew, you'd try to find her, and whoever wanted her dead would be watching for exactly that. So you made the decision for both of us. I kept her alive. Damien spun, his bloodied hand leaving marks on Cole's shirt as he grabbed him again. You took my wife. You took my child. You let me mourn. And if I hadn't, they'd both be corpses right now. Cole's composure finally shattered. Do you think I wanted this? Do you think it was easy watching you fall apart? But I knew that someone in your inner circle wanted her dead. And until I could figure out who, the only way to protect her was to make everyone believe she was already gone. Damien released him, breathing hard. Did you figure it out? No. Cole's voice was hollow. Whoever it was, they were careful. No traces, no loose ends. After a while, I thought maybe they'd given up. Maybe they believed the lie. They didn't. Damien walked to his desk, pulled out a folder he'd been reviewing before Cole arrived, and threw it down. Photographs spilled across the surface. I had someone pull the original crash file after I saw her. Look at these. Cole leaned over, studying the images. They showed the burned wreckage of Ivy's car, the twisted metal, the charred interior. But there were other photos too, ones that hadn't been in the official report. Close-ups of the accelerant pattern, the precise way the fuel line had been compromised. Professional work, Cole muttered. More than that. Look at the timestamps. Cole's eyes narrowed. The photos from the scene showed a fully engulfed vehicle, but the timestamp on the emergency call was 12 minutes before the fire reached its peak. Someone called it in early, Cole said slowly. Someone who knew it was going to happen. Damien leaned against the desk. They wanted first responders on scene fast, wanted the narrative locked down before anyone could ask questions. Why? Because a delayed response might have meant actual forensics, real investigation. They needed it ruled an accident immediately. Cole ran a hand through his hair. Then they're still out there, still dangerous. And Ivy just exposed herself. Damien's voice was grim. If I saw her, others could too. She's been hiding for 3 years, and today she's selling roses on a street corner in broad daylight. Why? Money, Cole said quietly. I sent her funds every month, but it probably wasn't enough. Not for 2 people. She must have gotten desperate. Damien felt something twist in his chest, anger and guilt in equal measure. She's been struggling while I've been sitting here building an empire. You didn't know. I should have. Damien straightened. Get me everything, her address, her routine, every detail about her life for the past 3 years. And Cole, yeah? If you've lied to me about anything else, now's the time to come clean. Cole held his gaze. There's one more thing. What? The boy, Noah. He's yours, no question. Damien's throat tightened. How old? 3.5. She was pregnant when she disappeared. A son. Damien had a son. A child who'd grown up without him, who didn't know his face, who'd spent his whole life in hiding. Get me the information, Damien said. Tonight. By midnight, Damien had a file spread across his desk that documented every month of Ivy's hidden life. Bank statements showing deposits from an anonymous account, Cole's payments, surveillance photos showing a small apartment in a rundown section of Joliet, images of Ivy leaving for work before dawn, returning after dark, always with Noah in tow. There were videos, too. Short clips Cole had collected. Insurance, he called it. Damien watched them in silence. Ivy reading to Noah on a worn couch. Ivy cooking in a kitchen barely bigger than a closet. Ivy smiling, actually smiling, as Noah showed her a drawing. In all the years Damien had known her, he'd rarely seen Ivy smile. Their marriage had been complicated, passionate, often volatile. They'd loved each other fiercely, but the life Damien led had cast long shadows. Ivy had never fully adjusted to the violence, the secrecy, the constant threat. She'd wanted out. He'd refused to let her go. And then she'd died. Or so he'd thought. Watching her now, seeing her move through this small, quiet life, Damien realized something that cut deeper than any betrayal. Ivy looked peaceful. Despite the poverty, despite the struggle, there was something in her expression he'd never seen when she was with him. Freedom. Boss. Vincent's voice crackled through the intercom. Cole's back, says it's urgent. Send him in. Cole entered, his face grim. We've got a problem. What kind of problem? Someone hit Ivy's apartment 2 hours ago. Damien was on his feet before Cole finished the sentence. Is she... She's alive. Took Noah and ran, but they torched the place. Nothing left but ashes. Who? Don't know yet, but they were professionals, in and out in under 4 minutes. If Ivy had been there... Cole didn't finish the sentence. Damien's mind raced. They knew. Somehow they knew she was alive. Or they were watching you, Cole said. You weren't exactly subtle this afternoon. If they had eyes on the street, they might have seen you chase her. Damien's jaw clenched. By revealing himself, by acting on impulse, he'd put Ivy in danger. Again. Find her, he said. Use every resource we have. She can't have gotten far with a 3-year-old. Already on it. I've got teams sweeping Joliet and the surrounding areas. But Damien, what? If she's running, she's not going to trust us. Not after we protected her into hiding for 3 years. She sees you as the threat. Then we don't give her a choice. Damien grabbed his jacket. She can hate me all she wants, but she and Noah are coming under my protection, whether she likes it or not. And if she refuses? Damien's expression was cold. Then I'll tie her to a chair until she listens. But I'm not losing her again. Not to fire, not to bullets, not to whoever's been hunting her. Cole nodded slowly. What about the rat? The traitor in the organization? Find Ivy first. The rest can wait. Boss, what if they're connected? What if the traitor is the same person who wanted Ivy dead? Damien paused at the door, that possibility crystallizing in his mind. Then when we find them, I'm going to make their death last a very, very long time. The safe house was in Gary, Indiana, a gray industrial city across the state line, far enough from Chicago to be off the radar, but close enough to reach quickly. Cole had acquired it years ago, one of a dozen properties kept under false names for exactly this kind of emergency. It took them 6 hours to track Ivy down. She'd made it to a bus station, bought tickets to Milwaukee using cash, and then, showing the survival instincts that had kept her alive for 3 years, doubled back and caught a different bus heading south. Smart, but not smart enough to evade the network of contacts Cole had cultivated. A gas station attendant recognized her from the photo. A trucker remembered giving her a ride. A motel clerk recalled a woman with a small boy paying for a room in quarters and dimes. They found her just before dawn, holed up in a condemned apartment building, Noah asleep in her arms, her eyes red from crying and exhaustion. Damien approached slowly, his hands visible, his voice calm. Ivy. She jerked awake, scrambling back against the wall, clutching Noah tighter. The boy stirred, but didn't wake. Stay away from us, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I'm not here to hurt you. You shouldn't be here at all. You shouldn't... Her voice broke. You were supposed to think I was dead. I did. For 3 years, I thought I'd lost you. Damien crouched down, keeping his distance. And then I saw you yesterday. You and him. Ivy's eyes darted to Noah, protective instinct overwhelming everything else. He's not yours. Don't lie to me, Ivy. I've seen the photos. He has my eyes. He's mine. Her arms tightened around the sleeping child. You don't get to claim him just because you share DNA. The words hit Damien like a physical blow, but he forced himself to stay calm. You're right. I haven't earned the right to be his father. But I've earned the right to keep you both alive. We don't need your protection. Your apartment burned down 6 hours ago. Damien's voice was flat. Professionals. The same people who tried to kill you 3 years ago. They're still out there, Ivy, and now they know you're alive. Her face went pale. How? Because I was careless. Because I saw you and I reacted instead of thinking. And if they were watching me, they saw you too. He leaned forward. I know you have every reason to hate me. I know you don't trust me. But right now, I'm the only thing standing between you and whoever wants you dead. Ivy's eyes glistened with tears. You're the reason they want me dead in the first place. Everything in your world, the violence, the danger, the constant fear, that's why I had to disappear. That's why I couldn't tell you about Noah, because being near you is a death sentence. You're not wrong. Damien's voice was rough. My life is poison. It destroys everything it touches. But you're already touched by it, Ivy. You have been since the day we met. And running won't change that. The only way out is through. Through what? Through finding who ordered the hit. Through eliminating the threat. Through ending this so you and Noah can actually be free. Noah stirred, his small face scrunching. Ivy rocked him gently, whispering soothing sounds until he settled again. If I come with you, she said finally, you promise me something. Anything. When this is over, you let us go. For real this time. No looking back, no checking up on us, no sending money through Cole. You let us disappear into a normal life. Damien felt something crack inside his chest. She was asking him to lose her twice, to save her life, and then walk away forever. But looking at Noah's peaceful face, at the way Ivy held him like he was her entire world, Damien knew he didn't have a choice. I promise, he said. Ivy studied his face for a long moment, searching for the lie. When she didn't find it, she nodded slowly. Okay. God. The safe house was a 2-story brick building that had once been a factory foreman's residence. Now it was reinforced steel doors, bulletproof windows, and enough ammunition stored in the basement to fight a small war. Cole met them at the door, his expression carefully neutral as Ivy carried Noah inside. The boy was awake now, his wide gray eyes taking in everything, the armed men stationed at the windows, the monitors showing security feeds, the harsh industrial lighting. Mama? His voice was small, uncertain. It's okay, baby. Ivy kissed his forehead. We're safe here. Damien watched them from across the room, maintaining distance. Every instinct screamed at him to go to them, to touch his son, to pull Ivy into his arms and never let go. But he'd made a promise. He'd respect her boundaries. For now. There's food in the kitchen, Cole said, addressing Ivy. Clothes in the bedroom upstairs. It's not much, but it's fine. Ivy's voice was tight. Thank you. She carried Noah upstairs without another word, leaving Damien and Cole alone in the main room. She hates me, Damien said quietly. She's terrified. There's a difference. Is there? Damien ran a hand over his face. 3 years, Cole. 3 years she's been out there, struggling, afraid, raising my son alone. Because of me. Because of the life I chose. You didn't choose to have someone try to kill her. No, but I chose the world that made it possible. Damien turned to the monitors, watching the empty streets outside. Find them. I don't care what it takes. Find who ordered the hit. I've already started. Cole pulled out a tablet, swiping through files. The original accident was too clean, too professional. That kind of work costs money and requires connections. I've been running down anyone in the organization with the resources and access to pull it off. How many names? 7, including me. Damien's eyes cut to Cole. You're not a suspect. I should be. I'm the one who helped her disappear. For all you know, I'm playing both sides. Are you? Cole met his gaze steadily. No, but you should consider the possibility. Don't let loyalty blind you. It was good advice, cold, practical, the kind of thinking that had kept them both alive this long. But Damien knew Cole, had fought beside him, bled with him, trusted him with his life 100 times over. Still. Give me the list, Damien said. Cole handed over the tablet. Damien scrolled through the names, his expression darkening with each one. Marcus Webb, head of security. Vincent Rossi, his driver. Sarah Chen, his accountant. Graham Maddox, his former mentor. Two others he barely recognized, newer members of the organization brought in after Ivy's death, and Cole himself. Graham's retired, Damien said, pausing on that name. He hasn't been active in the organization for 5 years. Graham's not retired. He's just quiet. Cole leaned against the wall. He still has connections, still moves pieces on the board, and he never liked Ivy. That was true. Graham had seen Ivy as a weakness, a liability. He'd counseled Damien more than once to end the marriage, to focus on business rather than emotion. You think he'd go that far? Damien asked. I think Graham believes in the organization above all else. If he thought Ivy was a threat to it, to you, he'd eliminate that threat without hesitation. Damien's jaw tightened. Then we start with him. There's one more thing you should see. Cole swiped to a new file, bringing up a document covered in dense text. This is from Graham's office. I had someone pull his old files while we were tracking Ivy. Look at the date. Damien scanned the document. It was an internal memo, marked confidential, dated 2 weeks before Ivy's accident. The content was vague, something about resolving potential security issues. But one line stood out. IH situation requires permanent solution. Proceed with discretion. IH, Ivy Hale. Son of a bitch, Damien breathed. It gets worse. Cole pulled up another file. Graham signed off on the crash investigation. He personally reviewed the forensic report and declared it an accident. He closed the case before anyone could dig deeper. The pieces fell into place with brutal clarity. Graham had ordered the hit. Graham had covered it up. Graham had looked Damien in the eye and offered condolences while knowing he'd tried to murder Ivy. Where is he now? Damien's voice was deadly calm. That's the problem. He's gone underground, literally. Bought a property outside the city 5 years ago and turned it into a fortress. Bunkers, tunnels, private security. He's paranoid as hell. Can we get to him? With enough resources, yeah, but it won't be clean. And if he knows we're coming, he'll run, Damien finished. We need to draw him out. How? Damien looked up at the ceiling, toward the room where Ivy and Noah slept. We let him think he's won. Let him believe Ivy's still vulnerable. And when he makes his move, we end him. Cole was quiet for a moment. You're using her as bait. I'm using the appearance of vulnerability as bait. Ivy and Noah won't be in danger. We'll have teams watching every angle. But Graham needs to think he has another shot at finishing what he started. And if he doesn't take it, then we go to him. Damien's expression hardened. Either way, this ends. Soon. Upstairs in the small bedroom, Ivy held Noah close, listening to the low murmur of voices below. She couldn't make out the words, but she recognized the tone. Damien was planning something. And despite everything, despite the fear, the anger, the desperate desire to protect her son from the darkness of Damien's world, a small part of Ivy wondered if maybe, just maybe, coming back was the only way to finally be free. The truth was, she'd never stopped running. Not really. Every day in hiding had been another day looking over her shoulder, another night jumping at shadows, another moment wondering if today would be the day they found her. But Damien didn't run. Damien hunted. And if she wanted to stop being prey, maybe it was time to stand beside a predator instead of hiding from him. Noah shifted in her arms, his small hand clutching her shirt. Mama, he whispered, half asleep. Who was that man downstairs? Ivy's throat tightened. She'd promised herself she'd never have this conversation, never have to explain to her son why his father was a ghost, why they lived in shadows, why their life was defined by fear. But promises, like so many things in Ivy's life, had a way of breaking. Someone who's going to keep us safe, she said softly. Is he a good guy? Ivy looked out the window at the dark streets beyond, at the world that had tried to kill her and would probably try again. I don't know, baby, she admitted. But right now, he's the only guy we've got. Morning came gray and cold, the kind of November dawn that felt more like dusk. Damien hadn't slept. He'd spent the hours before sunrise in the basement of the safe house, surrounded by maps, surveillance photos, and the accumulated evidence of 3 years of lies. Graham Maddox stared back at him from a dozen different angles, entering restaurants, leaving his fortified estate, shaking hands with politicians and criminals alike. The man who'd taught Damien everything about power, about control, about surviving in a world where weakness was fatal. The man who'd tried to kill his wife. Coffee's ready. Cole appeared at the bottom of the stairs, 2 mugs in hand. He looked as exhausted as Damien felt. Any movement on Graham's property? Damien accepted the coffee without looking up from the photos. Nothing unusual, same security rotation, same patterns. If he knows we're on to him, he's not showing it. He knows. Damien finally raised his eyes. Graham didn't survive 40 years in this business by being careless. The question is whether he thinks we're a threat worth responding to. You want to make yourself a bigger target. I want to force his hand. Damien set down his mug. How many people did we lose in the Flanagan Territory War? Cole's expression darkened. 12 dead, twice that many wounded. Why? Because Graham's been feeding information to the Flanagans. That's who the rat is. That's who's been bleeding us for months. You're sure? Nothing else makes sense. Graham wants me weak, distracted, vulnerable. He's been orchestrating this whole thing, the attacks on our operations, the leak about the traitor, all of it. He's trying to destabilize the organization from the inside. Cole was quiet for a moment, processing. If that's true, half the moves we've made in the past 6 months have been playing into his strategy. Exactly. Damien stood, pacing the small space. He's been 3 steps ahead because we didn't know we were fighting him, but now we do. So what's the play? We give him what he wants. A clear shot at eliminating me and taking control of the organization. Damien, it's the only way to draw him out. Graham won't come after me directly, not while I'm fortified and surrounded by loyal men. But if I appear vulnerable, if I make a mistake he can exploit, he'll strike. Cole set his coffee down with enough force to slosh liquid over the rim. You're talking about making yourself bait. The same thing you're doing with Ivy. I'm talking about ending this. Damien's voice was hard. Graham's been pulling strings for too long. He killed my wife, or tried to. He's killed a dozen of our people. He's turned the organization into a battlefield. And he's done it all from the shadows, untouchable, protected by the loyalty I used to feel for him. Used to? Damien's jaw tightened. I buried that loyalty when I buried Ivy. There's nothing left now but the work. Footsteps on the stairs made both men turn. Ivy appeared carrying Noah on her hip. The boy was awake, his gray eyes wide and curious as he took in the basement, the weapons on the walls, the monitors glowing with security feeds, the 2 dangerous men watching him. I need to talk to you, Ivy said, addressing Damien. Her voice was steady, but there was tension in her shoulders, wariness in every line of her body. Cole, give us a minute, Damien said. Cole hesitated, his eyes flicking between them, then nodded and headed upstairs. When his footsteps faded, Ivy set Noah down. Stay close to Mama, okay, baby? She murmured. Noah nodded, leaning against her leg the same way he had on the street corner. The gesture hit Damien harder than he'd expected. This small person, his son, who instinctively sought protection from his mother and viewed Damien as a stranger. You're planning something, Ivy said. It wasn't a question. I'm planning to keep you safe. By using me as bait, I heard you and Cole talking last night. Damien didn't deny it. You won't be in real danger. We'll control every variable, cover every angle. But Graham needs to think, I don't care about Graham. Ivy's voice cut through his explanation. I care about him. She looked down at Noah. He's 3 years old, Damien. He doesn't understand any of this. And I won't let you turn him into collateral damage in whatever war you're fighting. That's exactly what I'm trying to prevent. By putting us in the middle of it? By ending it. Damien took a step closer, then stopped, remembering his promise to respect her boundaries. Graham won't stop, Ivy. He's had 3 years to forget about you. And instead he burned down your apartment the moment he knew you were alive. He's obsessed with eliminating you because you represent something he can't control, a piece of my life that exists outside the organization. Ivy's laugh was bitter. I was never outside it. That's why I left. I know. The admission cost him something. I know I dragged you into darkness. I know I asked you to live in a world you hated. But you're in it now, whether you want to be or not. And the only way out is to cut off the head of the snake. And then what? You think killing one man will change everything? There'll just be another Graham, another threat, another reason why being near you is dangerous. Maybe. Damien's voice was quiet. But at least Noah will be able to grow up without someone actively hunting him. The words hit their mark. Ivy's expression flickered. Fear, calculation, the terrible math every mother did when weighing her child's safety. Noah tugged on her sleeve. Mama, I'm hungry. I know, baby. Let's go upstairs and find you some breakfast. She lifted him again, but paused at the stairs, looking back at Damien. If you're going to do this, I want to know the plan. All of it. No secrets, no protecting me by keeping me in the dark. If my son's life is on the line, I deserve to know exactly what we're walking into. Damien nodded slowly. Fair enough. And one more thing. Ivy's eyes were hard. If this goes wrong, if anything happens to Noah because of your choices, there won't be anywhere in the world you can hide from me. Understand? Looking at her face, the fierce protective rage of a mother defending her child, Damien saw a glimpse of the woman he'd fallen in love with. Not the frightened girl who'd fled into hiding, but the fighter underneath, the one who'd survived 3 years on the streets with a toddler and never once given up. I understand, he said. She held his gaze for another moment, then disappeared upstairs with Noah, leaving Damien alone with the ghosts of his past and the bloody plans for his future. The war room, as Cole called it, occupied most of the second floor. Maps covered one wall, showing Graham's property in obsessive detail, guard rotations, camera placements, underground tunnels that connected the main house to a network of bunkers. Vincent had arrived an hour ago with Marcus Webb and Sarah Chen, the three of them now clustered around a laptop reviewing thermal imaging of the estate. Ivy sat in the corner, Noah coloring quietly beside her, watching everything with sharp eyes. Graham's got 12 men on rotation, Marcus said, pointing to red dots on the thermal display. Ex-military, well-trained. They're not rent-a-cops. What about the tunnels? Damien asked. 3 main arteries, all reinforced concrete. He can move between buildings without being exposed. There's also a bolt hole that leads to a garage 300 yards from the main structure. If we come at him hard, he'll rabbit. Then we don't come at him hard. Damien turned to the group. We come at him smart. Meaning? Sarah Chen looked up from her laptop. She was a small woman with quick hands and quicker mind, responsible for moving the organization's money through a labyrinth of shell companies and offshore accounts. Meaning we make Graham think he's winning. We leak information that we found evidence of the traitor but haven't identified them yet. We stage an internal investigation, create paranoia, make it look like we're tearing the organization apart from the inside. Vincent frowned. Won't that actually destabilize things? That's the point. Graham's been waiting for the organization to fracture so he can step in and take control. We're going to give him exactly what he wants, or make him think we are. While he's focused on exploiting the chaos, we'll be closing in on him. Cole had been quiet throughout the briefing, his expression unreadable. Now he spoke. And Ivy? All eyes turned to her. She met their stares without flinching, one hand resting protectively on Noah's shoulder. We stage a leak that Ivy's been found, Damien said. That she's alive, that she's here, and that she's willing to testify about what she knows. Testify to who? Marcus asked. Doesn't matter. What matters is that Graham believes Ivy can connect him to the original hit. It'll force him to act. By sending another kill team, Ivy said flatly. Yes. Damien didn't sugarcoat it. But this time we'll be ready. We'll control the location, the timing, every variable. His people will walk into a trap. And while they're dying, you'll be going after Graham, Cole said. That's the idea. Sarah leaned back in her chair. It's risky. A lot of moving parts. A lot of ways it could go wrong. Do you have a better plan? Damien's tone wasn't confrontational, just direct. Sarah considered, then shook her head. No, but I want redundancies. Multiple extraction routes, backup teams, fail-safes in case Graham doesn't react the way we expect. Agreed. Damien turned to Marcus. How fast can you assemble a team we trust? People who aren't on Graham's payroll. 48 hours. Maybe less if I pull from outside the organization. Do it. I want operators who don't have divided loyalties. Ex-military, private contractors, anyone with the skills and the discretion. Marcus nodded and stepped away, already making calls. Vincent stood as well. I'll start spreading the leak about the internal investigation. Make it look organic, like rumors bubbling up from the ranks. Good. Sarah, I need you to trace Graham's money. If he's been funding attacks on our operations, there'll be a trail. On it. Sarah's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. That left Cole, who was watching Damien with the expression of a man who knew exactly what his boss was thinking and didn't like it. You're going to go after him yourself, Cole said when they were alone. I'm going to finish it. Damien, Graham taught you everything you know. He's not going to be easy to kill. I'm counting on it. Damien's voice was cold. I want him to know it's me. I want him to see my face when I end him. Cole was silent for a moment. What if he knows something? What if there's more to this than just Graham wanting control? What do you mean? I mean, why did he wait 3 years? If he wanted Ivy dead, he had plenty of opportunities before the crash. Why that specific moment? Why go to such lengths to stage it as an accident? It was a good question, one Damien had been turning over in his mind since he'd seen Graham's memo. You think someone else was involved? I think Graham doesn't usually get his hands dirty with domestic issues. He's a strategist, not a hitman. So either Ivy posed a bigger threat than we realized, or someone with more influence than Graham wanted her gone. The implications settled over the room like ice water. If there was another player, someone above Graham in the food chain, then killing him wouldn't end the threat. It would just escalate it. Then we find out, Damien said. We take Graham alive if we can. Make him talk. And if he won't? Damien's expression was bleak. Then we make him wish he had. Ivy found Damien that night on the roof of the safe house, staring out at the distant glow of Chicago's skyline. Noah was asleep downstairs, watched over by Sarah, who'd proven surprisingly gentle with the boy, despite her cold professional demeanor. He likes her, Ivy said, announcing her presence. Damien didn't turn. Noah? He asked if the lady with the computer could read him a story. First time he's trusted anyone new since we went into hiding. Sarah lost a daughter a few years ago, custody battle with her ex-husband. She doesn't talk about it, but I think Noah reminds her of what she's missing. Ivy joined him at the edge, wrapping her coat tighter against the wind. Everyone in your world has ghosts. Ghosts are easier to carry than living people. They don't ask questions or demand explanations. Is that what I am to you? A ghost you're trying to resurrect? Damien finally looked at her. You were never a ghost. Even when I thought you were dead, you haunted me. Every decision I made, every move in the organization, I found myself asking what you would think, whether you'd be proud or disgusted. And which was it usually? Disgusted. The admission came without hesitation. I became everything you hated about this life, harder, colder, more ruthless. I told myself it was survival, but the truth is I stopped caring about the difference between necessary violence and cruelty. Ivy was quiet, processing this version of Damien, more honest, more vulnerable than the man she'd left behind. What changed? Seeing you again, seeing Noah. Damien turned back to the skyline. For 3 years I've been building an empire on the foundation of your death. Turned my grief into armor, my rage into weapons. And then I saw you selling roses in the rain, and all of it, the power, the fear, the carefully constructed walls, it all meant nothing. Because you realized you'd been living a lie. Because I realized I'd turned myself into exactly the kind of monster you ran from. He paused. Noah's eyes. When he looks at me, there's no recognition, no connection, just wariness. He sees a stranger, and worse, he sees a threat. That's what I've become. Ivy's hand moved unconsciously to her own eyes, remembering 1,000 moments of Noah studying the world with that same gray gaze. He's smart, careful. I taught him to be suspicious of everyone. Good. That'll keep him alive. I don't want him to just survive, Damien. I want him to live, to know what it's like to not be afraid all the time. Is that why you came back? Why you stopped running? Ivy considered lying, then decided against it. I came back because I was tired. Tired of being afraid, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of working 3 jobs and still barely making rent. But mostly I came back because of something Noah said. What? He asked me why we didn't have a daddy like the other kids at daycare. Her voice cracked slightly, and I realized I'd been so focused on keeping him safe that I'd forgotten he deserves more than just survival. He deserves a life. With me in it? I don't know. Ivy's honesty was brutal. You're his father, but that doesn't mean you know how to be his dad. And I won't let you break his heart the way you broke mine. I never meant to hurt you. But you did. Constantly. Every time you chose the organization over me, every time you came home with blood on your hands, every time you asked me to look the other way while you did terrible things, you broke me piece by piece until there was nothing left but the choice to stay and die, or leave, and maybe, possibly, live. Damien absorbed the words like punches, each one landing with precision. I was young, stupid. I thought power would protect the people I loved. Power doesn't protect anyone. It just gives you more to lose. Then why are you still here? You could have kept running, disappeared again. Why trust me to protect you now when you couldn't trust me before? Ivy met his eyes, her own shining with unshed tears, because Noah deserves to know his father. And because despite everything, despite the violence and the lies and the darkness, when you looked at me on that street corner, I saw something I thought was dead. What? The man I fell in love with, buried under all the armor and the rage, but still there, still fighting to get out. The words hung between them, raw and dangerous. Damien felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the foundation he'd built from Ivy's supposed death. I don't know if that man exists anymore, he said quietly. Then find him. Ivy's voice was fierce. Because the one standing in front of me right now, the killer, the crime boss, the man who turns grief into weapons, that's not who Noah needs. That's not who I need. What do you need? I need you to remember why you wanted out of this life in the first place. I need you to look at your son and see a future worth fighting for, not just another thing to protect with violence. I need you to choose us over the Empire, even if it costs you everything. And if I can't? Ivy's smile was sad. Then I'll take Noah and disappear again. And this time, you won't find us. She turned and walked back to the stairwell, leaving Damien alone with the wind and the weight of impossible choices. The leak went out at midnight, carefully worded and strategically placed. Vincent had contacts in 3 different news organizations, reporters who owed favors or could be bought. By morning, rumors would be circulating in the criminal underworld. Damien Cross's organization was tearing itself apart over a suspected traitor. Internal investigations, loyalty tests, executions, and buried in the noise, a smaller detail. Ivy Cross, presumed dead for 3 years, had been found alive and was cooperating with authorities. It was bait wrapped in chaos, designed to make Graham act before he could think. Marcus returned just after dawn with 6 men, hard-eyed professionals with the kind of scars that came from real combat, not street fights. They set up a perimeter around the safe house, established overlapping fields of fire, ran drills until every possible approach was covered. Sarah traced the money and found what they were looking for. A series of payments from one of Graham's shell companies to a group of freelance operators known for making problems disappear. The timing matched up perfectly with Ivy's accident. He's not even trying to hide it, Sarah said, showing Damien the transaction records. Either he's incredibly arrogant or he wants us to find it, Cole finished. He's confirming what we already suspect. Why? Damien studied the numbers, looking for the trap. Because he knows you'll come for him. And he's ready. Vincent appeared in the doorway. Boss, we've got movement. 3 vehicles just left Graham's estate, heading east toward the city. How many people? Thermal shows at least 12, maybe more. They're heavily armed. Damien felt the familiar coldness settle over him, the battle calm that had kept him alive through a dozen wars. How long until they reach us? At current speed, 90 minutes. Then we have an hour to get ready. Damien turned to Marcus. You know what to do? Marcus nodded grimly. We'll make sure they regret coming. Cole, I need you to take Ivy and Noah to the secondary location. Don't argue, he added, seeing Cole's expression. If this goes wrong, they need someone they trust. And if it goes right, then you bring them back and we end this. Cole hesitated, then nodded. Don't die, Damien. We've come too far for that. No promises. Ivy was in the bedroom, packing the few belongings they'd accumulated, when Damien knocked. Noah was on the bed, building something with blocks Sarah had found somewhere. Cole's going to take you somewhere safe, Damien said without preamble. The attack's coming. Yes. Ivy looked at Noah, at his small hands stacking blocks with intense concentration, at the life she'd fought so hard to protect. And you're staying here. Someone has to. It doesn't have to be you. Yes, it does. Damien crouched down so he was eye level with Noah. The boy looked up, surprised, his gray eyes meeting Damien's. Hey, Noah. I'm Damien. I know. Noah's voice was small but steady. You're the man who makes Mama scared. The words were a knife to the heart, but Damien didn't flinch. Yeah, I am. But I'm going to fix that, okay? I'm going to make sure you and your mama don't have to be scared anymore. How? By stopping the bad people who want to hurt you. Noah considered this with the seriousness of a child who'd grown up too fast. Are you a bad people too? Sometimes, Damien admitted, but I'm trying to be better. Because of Mama? Because of you. Noah stared at him for a long moment, then returned to his blocks. It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. It was a child reserving judgment, waiting to see if the stranger's promises meant anything. Damien stood, facing Ivy. Cole will keep you safe. I know. She paused. Don't die, Damien. Noah's already lost 3 years with you. Don't make it permanent. I'll do my best. Your best got you shot twice and stabbed once in the time I knew you. Then I'll do better than my best. Ivy's smile was fleeting, but genuine. Good luck. She gathered Noah, and they left with Cole, disappearing into an armored vehicle that vanished into the gray morning. Damien watched until they were out of sight, then turned back to the safe house. The men were ready. Weapons loaded, positions established, every angle covered. Vincent was in the basement monitoring security feeds. Marcus was on the roof with a rifle. Sarah had armed herself and taken a position covering the rear entrance. Damien stood in the center of the main room, a pistol in one hand and Graham's memo in the other. IH situation requires permanent solution. 15 words that had changed everything. They're 10 minutes out, Vincent's voice crackled over the radio. Damien folded the memo and tucked it into his jacket. When this was over, he'd burn it. Burn every reminder of Graham's betrayal and the 3 years of lies. But first, he had to survive the next hour. The vehicles appeared on the monitors, black SUVs moving in formation, professional and precise. They stopped a block away, and men poured out, spreading into tactical positions. 12 confirmed, Marcus reported from the roof. No, wait, 15. They've got support vehicles. Let them come, Damien said quietly. The first shots shattered the morning silence, bullets punching through reinforced windows, sparking off steel doors. Marcus returned fire from the roof, his rifle barking in controlled bursts. The attackers scattered, seeking cover, regrouping. It was going to be a long fight. The firefight lasted 17 minutes. Damien counted every second, his internal clock as precise as the rhythm of his heartbeat. 17 minutes of controlled chaos, of bullets chewing through brick and mortar, of Marcus's rifle singing its deadly song from the rooftop, while Sarah held the rear corridor with the cold efficiency of someone who'd done this before. Vincent coordinated from the basement, his voice steady over the radio despite the violence shaking the building's foundation. 4 down on the east side. Marcus, you've got 2 flanking left. The rifle barked twice. Not anymore. Damien moved through the safe house like a ghost, appearing in windows long enough to fire, then vanishing before return fire could find him. He'd learned this dance from Graham himself years ago when the old man had still been teaching instead of scheming. The irony wasn't lost on him. They're pulling back, Marcus reported, regrouping behind the vehicles. How many left? 9, maybe 10. Hard to get an exact count. Damien watched through a shattered window as the attackers consolidated their position. They were good, professional, but they'd lost the element of surprise. Now it was a siege, and sieges favored the defenders, unless the defenders ran out of ammunition first. Vincent, how are we on rounds? Marcus is at 60%, Sarah's at 40. You? Damien checked his magazine. 50, give or take. They'll wait us out, Sarah's voice crackled. Test our defenses, probe for weaknesses. This isn't a smash and grab anymore. She was right. The attackers had shifted tactics, content to pin them down while they figured out the best approach, which meant Graham was being cautious, which meant he suspected a trap. We need to give them a reason to commit, Damien said. Like what? Marcus asked. Like me. Silence on the radio. Then Vincent's voice, tight with tension. Boss, that's suicide. That's the job. Damien moved to the front door, checking the street through the reinforced peephole. They came here for Ivy, but she's gone. The next best thing is me. If I walk out there, give them a target, they'll take it. And then what? Sarah demanded. Then Marcus puts a bullet in whoever gives the orders. We cut off the head, the body dies. You're assuming they don't just shoot you the second you step outside. They won't. Graham wants information. He needs to know what I know, who I've told, whether Ivy's really cooperating with authorities or if it's another bluff. Damien pulled on his jacket, checking the spare magazines in his pockets. They'll try to take me alive. That's when you move. This is insane, Vincent said, but his tone had shifted. He was running scenarios, calculating odds. You'd need a distraction, something to split their attention. I'll handle that. How? Damien smiled, cold and mirthless. I'll tell them the truth. Before anyone could argue further, he opened the door and stepped into the street. The morning air hit him like a slap, cold and sharp, carrying the acrid smell of gunpowder and burned rubber. The attackers saw him immediately, weapons swinging in his direction, but they held fire, waiting for orders. Damien walked into the middle of the street, hands visible but not raised. Surrender was weakness, and weakness invited bullets. A man emerged from behind one of the SUVs, tall, angular, with the kind of face that belonged in corporate boardrooms but carried itself with military precision. Damien didn't recognize him, which meant Graham had brought in outside talent. Damien Cross, the man called out. His accent was clipped, European maybe. You're either very brave or very stupid. Neither, just tired of playing games. Damien stopped 20 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to dive for cover if things went wrong. Graham sent you to kill my wife and son. Instead, you found me. That must be disappointing. Where are they? Safe. Far from here. Far from you. The man smiled. Everything's far until it isn't. We'll find them eventually. No, you won't. Because in about 30 seconds, you and your team are going to be dead, and Graham's going to be wondering why he sent amateurs to do a professional's job. That got a reaction. The man's smile faltered and his hand moved fractionally toward his weapon. Brave words for a man standing alone in the street. I'm not alone. Marcus's rifle spoke first, the sound sharp and final. The man's head snapped back, his body crumpling like a marionette with cut strings. Before his corpse hit the pavement, the rest of Damien's team opened fire. The ambush was perfect. Sarah had positioned herself in the building across the street during the initial firefight, using a fire escape Damien had spotted on the monitors. She rained fire down on the attackers from above, while Marcus worked from the rooftop. Vincent emerged from the basement with a shotgun covering Damien's retreat. But perfect plans had a way of shattering when bullets started flying. Damien was halfway back to the safe house when he heard the explosion. The sound rolled across the street like thunder, followed by the shriek of twisting metal. One of the attackers had thrown a grenade at Sarah's position, and the fire escape was collapsing. Sarah's down! Vincent's voice cracked with urgency. Damien changed direction mid-stride, sprinting toward the collapsing structure. Sarah was visible through the smoke, pinned under twisted metal, her weapon knocked from her hands. Two attackers were moving toward her position, advancing through the debris. Damien shot the first one before his brain registered the decision, muscle memory and training taking over. The second attacker turned, bringing his rifle up, but Damien was already moving. He closed the distance in 3 steps, slamming into the man with enough force to drive them both to the ground. They fought in the wreckage, close and brutal. The attacker was younger, faster, but Damien had decades of survival instinct. He got his hands on the man's throat and squeezed until the struggling stopped. "Boss, we've got more coming." Marcus's warning came too late. Damien looked up to see 3 more vehicles screaming around the corner, reinforcements arriving faster than expected. Graham had planned for the ambush, prepared for Damien's trap with a trap of his own. "Get Sarah out of here," Damien barked into his radio. "Everyone fall back to the secondary position." "What about you?" Vincent demanded. "I'll buy you time. Now move." Damien grabbed the dead attacker's rifle and took position behind an overturned vehicle. The new arrivals were deploying with military precision, establishing a perimeter, cutting off escape routes. He counted at least 15 fresh hostiles, all heavily armed. He was outgunned, outmanned, and rapidly running out of options. The radio crackled. "Boss, I'm not leaving you here." "That's an order, Vincent." "Fuck your orders." Vincent's voice was fierce. "Marcus, can you get Sarah mobile?" "Working on it." "Then work faster. We've got 30 seconds before they're in position." Damien fired controlled bursts, forcing the attackers to take cover, buying precious seconds. He could see Vincent dragging Sarah from the wreckage, Marcus providing covering fire from a new position. They were going to make it out. He wasn't. A bullet clipped his shoulder, spinning him around. Another hit his thigh, and his leg buckled. Damien went down hard, the rifle clattering away across the pavement. He reached for his pistol, but hands grabbed him from behind, rough and efficient. "Got him!" someone shouted. Damien fought, breaking one man's nose with a headbutt, driving his elbow into another's ribs. But there were too many. They swarmed him, fists and boots raining down until the world narrowed to pain and the taste of blood. The last thing he heard before consciousness fled was Vincent's voice on the radio, raw with fury. "We're coming back for you, boss. I swear it." Then darkness took him. Damien woke to the smell of concrete and motor oil, his head throbbing in rhythm with his pulse. He tried to move and discovered his hands were zip-tied behind his back, his ankles bound to a metal chair. The room was windowless, lit by a single bare bulb hanging from a water-stained ceiling. A basement. Probably Graham's estate, judging by the quality of the construction and the sense of depth. He was underground, buried in one of the bunkers Marcus had identified on the thermal scans. "You're awake." "Good." Damien's head snapped up, sending fresh waves of pain through his skull. Graham Maddox stood in the doorway, looking exactly as Damien remembered. Silver hair immaculately styled, tailored suit without a wrinkle, eyes cold and calculating behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Graham." Damien's voice came out rough, his throat raw. "Damien." Graham crossed the room with measured steps, pulling up a second chair and sitting with the casual confidence of a man in complete control. "You look terrible." "Your men hit hard. I trained them to." Graham folded his hands in his lap. "Though I must admit I'm disappointed. I taught you better than to walk into an obvious ambush." "Funny. I was thinking the same thing about you." Graham's smile was thin. "Meaning?" "Meaning you sent 20 men to kill a woman and child, and 12 of them are dead. That's not efficiency, Graham. That's desperation. Casualties are acceptable when the objective is achieved. Except you didn't achieve it. Ivy and Noah are still alive, still protected." Damien leaned forward despite the restraints. "You're losing, old man, and you know it." Something flickered behind Graham's eyes. Not anger, but something colder. Calculation. "You think this is about winning or losing? You think I'm some street thug fighting over territory?" "I think you're a coward who tried to murder my wife because she threatened your control over me." "Your wife threatened the organization." "How? By loving me? By asking me to choose a life outside the violence? By making you weak." Graham stood, pacing the small room. "I built you, Damien, took you from nothing and made you into what you are, gave you power, purpose, an empire, and she was going to take it all away. She was pregnant. I know, that's exactly why she had to go." Graham turned, his expression almost pitying. "Children make men sentimental. They create priorities that conflict with the organization. Ivy and that child would have destroyed everything we built." Damien felt rage building in his chest, hot and terrible. "So you decided to kill them." "I decided to protect the investment. You are the future of this organization, But not if you're distracted by domestic complications. Noah isn't a complication. He's my son. Exactly. And what happens when he gets sick? When he needs his father at a school play instead of handling business? When you have to choose between his safety and the organization's survival? Graham shook his head. I've seen it happen a dozen times. Strong men brought low by love, by family, by the weakness that comes with caring too much about something you can't control. So you took the choice away from me. I made the hard decision you couldn't make yourself. Graham's voice was matter-of-fact, as if discussing a business transaction. Ivy's death, her supposed death, freed you. You became exactly what the organization needed: ruthless, focused, unstoppable. I became a ghost. You became a king. Graham leaned against the wall. Everything you've accomplished in the past 3 years, every territory you've taken, every enemy you've destroyed, you did that because you weren't bound by sentiment. Ivy's death liberated you. Damien stared at the man who'd been his mentor, his teacher, his father figure, and saw only a stranger. You're insane. I'm practical. There's a difference. Then here's a practical question. If you wanted me focused on the organization, why did you spend the last 6 months trying to destabilize it? Why leak information to the Flanagans? Why orchestrate attacks on our operations? Graham's expression shifted, surprise flickering across his features before he controlled it. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Answer the question. Because you were getting comfortable, complacent. The organization was growing, but you were growing soft with it. You needed a reminder that power requires constant vigilance, that threats can come from anywhere. Graham smiled. I gave you an enemy to fight, a mystery to solve. I kept you sharp. You got 12 of our people killed. Acceptable losses for the greater good. Graham pushed off the wall. Don't look at me like that, Damien. You've made the same calculations 100 times. How many men have you sacrificed for tactical advantage? How many lives have you traded for territory? Those were soldiers. They knew the risks. And so did the men who died because of my strategy. They signed up for this life, same as you, same as me. Their deaths meant something. Damien tested his restraints, feeling the zip ties bite into his wrists. What happens now? Now? Graham checked his watch. Now we have a conversation about the future, specifically about how you're going to help me transition the organization into new leadership. You want me to hand over control. I want you to acknowledge that you've become a liability. Ivy's resurrection, your son, this obsession with revenge, it's all evidence that you can't separate personal feelings from business decisions anymore. The organization deserves better. So you'll kill me and take over. Not kill, retire. Graham pulled out a phone showing Damien a photo. It took a moment to process what he was seeing. Cole, bound and beaten, in a room similar to this one. I have your right hand, Graham said quietly. I have your operations, your resources, your loyalty network. The only thing I don't have is your formal surrender. Sign over control, and both you and Cole walk away. Refuse, and you'll watch him die before I put a bullet in your head. Damien's mind raced, running scenarios, looking for leverage. You're bluffing. Kill me, and the organization fractures. There'll be a civil war for control. Perhaps, but I've been preparing for that possibility for years. I have alliances you don't know about, resources you've never seen, contingencies built on contingencies. Graham leaned close. I taught you well, Damien, but I taught myself better. Then you've already lost. How do you figure? Because you're still talking, still trying to convince me to surrender peacefully. Damien met Graham's eyes. If you really had everything under control, you'd have killed me the moment your men dragged me in here. But you didn't. Which means you need something from me. Information, access, legitimacy, something you can't get by force. Graham's expression hardened. You're reaching. Am I? Then prove it. Pull the trigger. End this. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Two apex predators locked in a battle of wills. Finally, Graham straightened, his mask of control sliding back into place. You have 24 hours to decide. Sign over the organization, or Cole dies. After that, we'll revisit the question of whether you're more useful alive or dead. And Ivy? Noah? Loose ends that will be tied up in due course. Graham walked to the door, then paused. For what it's worth, I did respect you. Still do, in a way. But respect doesn't change necessity. The organization comes first. It always has. The door closed with a hollow clang, locks engaging with mechanical finality. Damien was alone in the darkness, bleeding, bound, with a clock ticking down to Cole's execution. But he wasn't helpless. Graham had made a mistake. He'd assumed that 3 years of grief had made Damien dependent on the organization, that losing Ivy had left him hollow inside. He hadn't counted on resurrection changing everything, on a 3-year-old boy with gray eyes giving Damien something worth fighting for beyond power and control. Graham had created a monster and thought he could control it. He was about to learn the difference between control and survival. Damien worked his wrists against the zip ties, feeling for any give. The plastic cut into his skin, drawing blood, but blood was slippery. He twisted his hands, forcing bones to compress, ignoring the pain as circulation cut off. It took 20 minutes of excruciating effort, but finally his left hand slipped free. He quickly undid the remaining restraints and stood, testing his injured leg. The bullet had gone clean through the muscle, painful but functional. The room had no obvious exits except the locked door, but Damien had spent enough time in buildings like this to know they always had weaknesses. He examined the walls, looking for access panels, ventilation shafts, anything that could be exploited. There, in the corner, hidden behind the chair, a floor drain covered by a metal grate, too small for a person, but large enough to see the pipe system underneath. Damien knelt, working the grate free with his fingers. The space below was cramped and dark, but he could see another room beyond, separated by a thin concrete wall. Standard bunker construction, designed to be modular and expandable, which meant the walls weren't as solid as they appeared. He grabbed the metal chair, testing its weight, heavy enough to work as a battering ram if he used it right. He positioned himself at an angle, then slammed the chair legs into the wall where the drain suggested a weak point. The first impact barely made a dent. The second cracked the concrete. The third opened a hole large enough to see through. On the other side was another cell, and in it, slumped against the wall, was Cole. Cole. Damien's voice was urgent but quiet. Can you hear me? Cole's head lifted slowly, his face a mass of bruises. Boss? I'm getting us out of here. How bad are you hurt? Ribs are cracked, maybe a concussion, but I can move. Cole dragged himself closer to the hole. Graham's been asking about Ivy, about what you told her, who else knows about his involvement. What did you tell him? That he can go to hell. Cole managed a pained smile. He didn't like that answer. Can you stand? If I have to. You have to. Damien slammed the chair into the wall again, widening the hole. We're not waiting for Graham's deadline. It took another 5 minutes of brutal work, but finally the opening was large enough for Cole to squeeze through. He emerged bloody and battered but alive, his eyes hard with the same determination that had kept him at Damien's side for a decade. What's the play? Cole asked. We find the armory, arm ourselves, and fight our way out. That's not a plan. That's suicide. You have a better idea? Cole thought for a moment, then shook his head. Actually, no, suicide it is. Despite everything, Damien felt a grim smile pull at his lips. This was what he'd missed during the 3 years of thinking Cole had betrayed him. The gallows humor, the absolute trust in the middle of impossible situations. Graham said this place has contingencies built on contingencies, Damien said, which means weapons stockpiles, escape routes, security protocols we don't know about. Cole finished. We're walking blind into a fortress. Then we'd better move fast. They slipped into the corridor beyond the cells, moving with the silent efficiency of men who'd operated together for years. The bunker was larger than Damien had expected, a maze of concrete corridors and reinforced doors. They passed storage rooms filled with supplies, server rooms humming with electronics, living quarters designed for long-term occupation. Graham had built himself an underground empire, a kingdom beneath the kingdom. And somewhere in this labyrinth, he was planning Ivy and Noah's deaths. They found the armory on the 3rd level down, protected by a keypad lock. Cole worked on it while Damien kept watch, listening for footsteps, voices, any sign they'd been discovered. Got it. The door hissed open, revealing racks of weapons, rifles, pistols, ammunition, tactical gear. They armed themselves quickly, taking only what they could carry effectively. Damien strapped on body armor, checked a Glock, loaded spare magazines. Cole did the same, moving with practiced efficiency despite his injuries. Now what? Cole asked. Now we find Graham. They moved deeper into the bunker, following the sound of voices. The corridors opened into a command center, monitors showing security feeds from across the estate, communication equipment linking to cells and contacts across the city. And at the center of it all, Graham stood with 3 other men, reviewing tactical displays. Damien recognized 2 of them, leaders from rival organizations, men who should have been enemies. Graham was brokering deals, making alliances, preparing to fill the power vacuum he was about to create. He's already moving, Cole whispered. He's not waiting for your answer. He's preparing to take over by force. Then we take him now. Damien raised his weapon, but Cole grabbed his arm. Wait, look at the screens. Damien followed Cole's gaze to one of the monitors. It showed a remote cabin, isolated and surrounded by woods. And inside, visible through thermal imaging, were 3 figures, 1 adult, 2 children. No, 1 adult and 1 child, but the thermal signature was wrong, too small, too young. That's not the safe house I took them to, Cole said, his voice tight. Graham found them. He's been tracking us this whole time. The adult figure on the screen moved, and Damien's blood went cold. It was Ivy, he was certain, which meant the small figure beside her was Noah. But there was a 3rd signature, larger, moving into position outside the cabin, an assault team. Graham was going to kill them while Damien watched, helpless, from the depths of his underground prison. No. The word came out as a growl. Damien raised his weapon, no longer concerned with stealth or strategy. No. He opened fire. The first bullet shattered the nearest monitor, sparks erupting in a cascade of dying electronics. The second caught one of Graham's associates in the shoulder, spinning him into a bank of computers. The third forced Graham himself to dive for cover behind a steel console. Chaos erupted in the command center. Armed guards appeared from side corridors, weapons raised. But Cole was already moving. He took down 2 with precise shots, then rolled behind a server rack as return fire chewed through the space he'd occupied seconds before. Damien kept firing, advancing through the room with controlled aggression. Every shot had a purpose, every movement calculated to close the distance between him and Graham. The old man had vanished behind the console, but Damien could see his shadow, could track his breathing. "You're too late," Graham's voice echoed across the firefight. "They're already dead." Damien didn't answer. He grabbed a flashbang from his tactical vest, pulled the pin, and lobbed it over the console. The explosion was deafening in the enclosed space, the light blinding even through closed eyelids. In the disoriented aftermath, he vaulted the console and landed on Graham, driving him to the floor. The old man fought back with surprising strength, decades of survival instinct overriding age and arthritis. He got a hand on Damien's throat, squeezing with gnarled fingers that felt like iron. Damien broke the grip with a vicious elbow strike, then hauled Graham up by his collar. "Call them off!" Damien's voice was raw, desperate. "Call off the hit on Ivy and Noah, now!" Graham's face was bloody, his glasses shattered, but his eyes held nothing but cold satisfaction. "Even if I wanted to, it's too late. The team has their orders. No communication once they're in position. Standard protocol. You taught me that. Then I'll kill you right here." "And they still die." Graham coughed, blood flecking his lips. "You can't save them, Damien. You can only choose whether you watch them die or join them." The monitor showing the cabin was still intact, miraculously untouched by the firefight. Damien could see the thermal signatures moving, the assault team closing in, Ivy and Noah inside, unaware of the death approaching through the woods. He had minutes at best, maybe less. "Boss!" Cole appeared at his shoulder, breathing hard. "We need to move. More guards are coming." Damien looked at Graham, at the man who'd shaped him, who'd tried to destroy him, who even now was smiling through broken teeth because he thought he'd won. "Where's that cabin?" Damien demanded. "You'll never make it in time." Damien slammed Graham's head against the floor, hard enough to rattle teeth. "Where is it?" Graham's smile widened. "Northern Michigan, 3 hours by car, 90 minutes by helicopter if you had one, which you don't. They'll be dead in 20 minutes. Damien released him, his mind racing through impossible calculations. 3 hours was a lifetime. 90 minutes might as well be forever. He looked at the monitor again, watching Ivy's thermal signature move through the cabin, watching Noah's smaller form stay close to her. His son, his wife, about to die while he stood helpless in a bunker miles away. There has to be a way, Cole said, reading Damien's expression. Graham's paranoid. He'd have contingencies, ways to reach his own people in emergencies. Not for this. Graham pushed himself into a sitting position, wiping blood from his mouth. This hit is isolated, autonomous. I learned from your wife's first escape. No communication means no compromise. But Damien was already moving, scanning the command center with new eyes. Graham was paranoid, yes, but paranoia meant redundancy, meant backups and fail-safes and ways to maintain control even when direct communication failed. There. On the far wall, a single red phone mounted in a locked case. Emergency communications, the kind of system that bypassed normal channels. Damien crossed to it, smashing the case with the butt of his pistol. The phone was old-fashioned, hardwired, probably connected to a dedicated satellite network. He lifted the receiver and heard a tone. That won't help you. Graham's voice was weaker now, pain catching up with adrenaline. That line goes to my personal security. They won't take orders from you. Then I'll make them an offer they can't refuse. Damien dialed, reading the emergency contact numbers stenciled on the phone's base. Someone picked up on the second ring. Verification code, a flat voice demanded. Damien glanced at Graham, who'd gone pale. I don't have a code, but I have Graham Maddox. And if you don't abort the Michigan operation in the next 30 seconds, I'm going to put a bullet in his head and upload the video to every news outlet in the country. Silence. Then, stand by! Graham started to laugh, a wet, painful sound. You're bluffing. You need me alive to call them off. I need you useful. There's a difference. Damien aimed his pistol at Graham's knee. Your choice. Call off the hit, or I start taking pieces. The voice returned on the phone. We need verification that you have primary. Damien grabbed Graham by the hair, forcing him toward the phone's microphone. Talk, now. Graham's resistance crumbled, fear finally breaking through his mask of control. Abort Michigan operation. Authorization Maddox 77 Echo. Abort immediately. Confirmed. Teams are being recalled. The line went dead. Damien let Graham fall back to the floor, then turned to the monitor. For a long moment, nothing changed. The assault team continued their approach, closing the final distance to the cabin. Then they stopped. The thermal signatures hesitated, held position, then began withdrawing into the woods. 30 seconds later, they were gone, melting back into the forest like ghosts. Damien's legs nearly gave out. He caught himself against the console, breathing hard, his entire body shaking with the aftermath of adrenaline and terror. You're going to regret that, Graham said from the floor. Those men will talk. They'll tell everyone I backed down, that I showed weakness. The organization will fracture. I don't care about the organization. Damien turned to Cole. Get Sarah and Marcus. Tell them to extract Ivy and Noah from that cabin and bring them somewhere safe. Somewhere Graham's people will never find. What about you? I'm finishing this. Cole nodded and disappeared into the corridor, leaving Damien alone with Graham in the wreckage of the command center. You've destroyed everything, Graham said quietly. Years of planning, decades of building power, gone because you couldn't let go of a woman who never belonged in this world. You're right. Damien crouched down beside the old man. She never belonged. Neither does Noah. And neither do I, not anymore. You think you can just walk away? The organization won't let you. The enemies we've made won't forget. You'll spend the rest of your life looking over your shoulder. Better than spending it as a monster. Damien stood. I'm done, Graham. With you, with this life, with everything you taught me to value. You wanted to know what Ivy and Noah mean to me? They mean I finally have a reason to be something other than what you made me. And what's that? Human. Damien raised his pistol, but a voice from the doorway stopped him. Don't. He turned to find Vincent standing there, Sarah beside him, both armed but not threatening. They looked exhausted, battered from the earlier firefight, but their eyes were clear. He's not worth it, Vincent said. You kill him, you become exactly what he always said you were. He tried to murder my family. I know, and we'll make sure he pays for that. But not like this, not with you pulling the trigger. Vincent stepped closer. Let the law handle it, boss. We've got evidence, recordings, everything we need to bury him legally. Let him rot in a cell instead of turning you into a killer in front of your son." Damien looked at Graham, at the pathetic figure bleeding on the floor, and felt the rage drain away. Vincent was right. Graham had spent his entire life operating in shadows, avoiding consequences, staying one step ahead of justice. The cruelest punishment would be dragging him into the light. "Sarah, you still have those financial records?" Damien asked. "Every transaction, every payment, every dirty dollar." Sarah held up a hard drive. "Enough to put him away for 3 lifetimes. Then we give it to the FBI. All of it. Graham's empire, his contacts, his operations, we burn it all to the ground." Graham's expression shifted from defiance to genuine fear. "You can't. The organization will collapse. Dozens of families depend on the income. Hundreds of people will lose their protection." "Should have thought of that before you tried to kill my wife." Damien turned away from him, addressing Sarah and Vincent. "Contact our lawyers. I want immunity deals in place for everyone who cooperates. We're dismantling this organization piece by piece, and anyone who wants to walk away clean gets the chance." "And the ones who don't?" Vincent asked. "They go down with Graham." Sarah was already working her phone, making calls, setting the machinery in motion. Vincent kept his weapon trained on Graham, who'd slumped against the console in defeat. "You'll regret this," Graham said one last time. "Without the organization, you're nothing. You'll be alone, vulnerable, waiting for the next enemy to find you." "Maybe." Damien headed for the door, then paused. "But I'd rather be alone and human than powerful and empty." "You taught me how to survive, Graham. Ivy taught me why." He left the old man in the ruins of his underground kingdom and climbed toward daylight. The cabin sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by pine trees and silence. Marcus had driven them north through the night, following coordinates Sarah had extracted from Graham's computer network. Cole rode shotgun, his injuries bandaged but still visible. Damien sat in the back, watching the landscape blur past, his mind too numb for coherent thought. They arrived at dawn, the sky turning from black to gray to pale gold. Smoke rose from the cabin's chimney, a thin trail against the brightening clouds. "She's still here," Marcus said, parking at a distance. "No sign of hostiles." Damien got out of the car slowly, his body protesting every movement. The firefight at the safe house, the beating in Graham's bunker, the emotional whiplash of the past 24 hours, it had all taken a toll. He walked to the cabin alone. The door opened before he could knock. Ivy stood there, Noah on her hip, her face pale but composed. She'd been crying recently, he could tell from her red-rimmed eyes, but her voice was steady. "Cole called, said you were coming." She stepped aside. "Come in." The cabin was small, rustic, the kind of place that belonged in vacation brochures. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace. Noah's drawings were scattered across a rough wooden table. It looked peaceful, safe, completely disconnected from the violence that had nearly reached it. "I'm sorry," Damien said. It was inadequate, but it was all he had. "For what? Saving our lives?" Ivy set Noah down, and the boy immediately returned to his drawings, glancing at Damien with wary curiosity. "For putting you in danger in the first place. For everything." Ivy was quiet for a moment, studying him. "Cole told me what happened, how you fought your way out, how you made Graham call off the hit, how you're dismantling the organization. It's the only way to keep you safe." "Is it?" She moved to the window, looking out at the forest. "Or is it because you finally realized what I knew 3 years ago, that the organization was poison, and staying in it would kill everything good you had left?" "Both, maybe." Damien approached carefully, maintaining distance. "I spent 3 years building power on the foundation of your death. Turned myself into exactly what Graham wanted, cold, ruthless, efficient. And then I saw you on that street corner, and I realized I'd been building a monument to nothing. So what now? Now I make sure Graham goes to prison for the rest of his life. Make sure everyone connected to the hit on you is held accountable. And then," he hesitated, "then I keep my promise. I let you go. Let you and Noah disappear into that normal life you wanted." Noah looked up from his drawing. "Are you leaving, Mama?" "Not today, baby." Ivy crouched beside him, smoothing his hair. "But maybe soon. Would you like that? To go somewhere new?" Noah considered this with a child's seriousness. Can we bring him? He pointed at Damien. The question hung in the air like a held breath. Ivy's eyes met Damien's, searching for something he wasn't sure he could provide. That depends on him, she said finally, on whether he can leave the old life behind and become someone new. I don't know if I can, Damien admitted. 3 years of being a ghost, of burying every soft emotion, of turning love into armor, I don't know how to undo that. You don't undo it. You build something new on top of it. Ivy stood, crossing to him. I'm not asking you to forget what you were. I'm asking if you can choose to be something different. For him. She gestured to Noah. For us. Damien looked at his son, at the small boy who'd inherited his eyes and his mother's strength. Noah was watching him with an expression that was becoming familiar, cautious hope, waiting to see if the stranger would prove trustworthy. I can try, Damien said. That's all I'm asking. Ivy's hand found his, her fingers lacing through his in a gesture that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. We'll figure out the rest as we go. Noah returned to his drawing, apparently satisfied with the adult's conversation. Damien watched him work, this small miracle he'd helped create, this piece of a future he'd thought was lost forever. What's he drawing? Damien asked. Ivy smiled. A house. He draws one every day, different each time, but always a house with a family inside. What kind of family? Usually him and me, but this one's different. She picked up the paper, showing Damien the crayon figures. A woman with long, dark hair, a small boy, and a tall figure with gray eyes standing beside them. He's been adding you, Ivy said softly. Ever since Cole told him you were fighting to keep us safe, he's been drawing you into the family. Damien felt something crack in his chest, the armor he'd built finally giving way. He'd faced down enemies, survived bullets and betrayals, built an empire from blood and will. But looking at his son's simple drawing, at the hope contained in colored wax and paper, he felt tears burn behind his eyes for the first time in 3 years. I don't deserve that, he said roughly. No, you don't. Ivy's honesty was brutal and loving in equal measure. But maybe that's the point. Maybe family isn't something you earn. Maybe it's something you choose every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Especially then. Noah held up his drawing. Do you like it? Damien crouched down to his son's level, taking the paper with careful hands. It's perfect. That's you. Noah pointed to the tall figure. Mama said you're my daddy. The word hit Damien like a physical blow. Daddy. Not father, not sir, not boss. Daddy. The word that meant bedtime stories and scraped knees and unconditional trust. Yeah, Damien managed. I am. Are you going to stay with us? Damien looked up at Ivy, saw her waiting for the answer, her expression guarded but hopeful. He thought about Graham rotting in a federal cell, about the organization crumbling, about the empire he'd built dissolving into evidence and testimony. He thought about the choice Vincent had offered him, justice over vengeance, humanity over power. He thought about his son's drawing and the family contained within it. If your mama will let me, Damien said, I'd like to try. Noah considered this, then nodded with a child's absolute certainty. Okay, but you have to learn to draw. Yours are probably terrible. Despite everything, Damien laughed. It felt strange, rusty, like a muscle he'd forgotten how to use. But it felt good too, like maybe there were pieces of himself that weren't completely dead after all. You'll teach me? He asked. I guess. Noah sighed with the patience of a 3-year-old dealing with incompetent adults. But you have to practice a lot. Deal. Ivy moved to the kitchen, giving them space, but Damien could see her shoulders shaking with silent laughter. Or maybe tears. Probably both. Outside, Marcus and Cole waited by the car, giving the family their moment. The sun was fully up now, burning off the morning mist, turning the forest into something bright and new. It would take time, Damien knew. Healing always did. The FBI would want testimony. The organization's collapse would create chaos. There would be threats and consequences and 1,000 complications between this moment and anything resembling normal. But for now, sitting on the floor of a remote cabin while his son taught him to draw houses and families, Damien Cross allowed himself something he hadn't permitted in 3 years. Hope. Noah handed him a green crayon. This is for the grass. The grass is always green in families. Damien took the crayon and started to draw, his lines shaky and unpracticed, nothing like the precision he brought to violence and strategy. But Noah watched with encouraging patience, and Ivy moved through the kitchen with quiet grace. And somewhere in the simple domestic rhythm, Damien felt the ghost he'd become slowly remembering how to be a man. The drawing took shape beneath their combined hands. A house with windows and a door, grass beneath and sky above, 3 figures standing together in crayon permanence. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start, and for the first time in 3 years, a start felt like enough. The piece lasted exactly 6 days. Damien spent those days learning the rhythms of a life he'd never imagined. Morning coffee while Noah ate cereal with intense concentration, afternoon walks through the forest where his son collected pine cones like treasure, evenings by the fire where Ivy read aloud while Noah fought sleep in Damien's lap. Small moments that felt impossibly large, fragments of normalcy that he clutched like lifelines. On the 7th morning, Cole arrived with news that shattered the fragile sanctuary. "Graham's people hit the federal transport," Cole said, his expression grim. 12 guards dead, Graham's gone. Damien was outside chopping firewood, a domestic task that felt surreal given the conversation. He buried the axe in the stump and turned to face Cole. "When?" 4 hours ago. Highway ambush, professional execution. They had inside information, knew the route, the timing, everything. He still has loyalists in the organization. More than we thought. Cole handed over a tablet showing crime scene photos. The transport van was a smoking wreck, bodies scattered across asphalt. The FBI's panicking. They thought they had their case locked down, but without Graham to testify against his network, most of their evidence is circumstantial. Damien stared at the photos, feeling the weight of his old life pressing back in. He's going to run, disappear into whatever bolt hole he prepared for this scenario. That's what the FBI thinks, but I know Graham better than they do. Cole's voice was dark. He's not running. He's coming here. How would he even know where we are? Because I told him. The voice came from the tree line, and Marcus stepped out with his hands raised, his face a mask of regret and resignation. "I'm sorry, Damien. I didn't have a choice." Damien's hand moved to his waist, but he wasn't armed. He'd left his weapons in the cabin, trying to embrace the fiction of safety. "Explain. Now." "Graham has my sister. Has had her for 3 days, ever since we raided his bunker." Marcus's voice cracked. "He sent me proof, photos, videos. Said if I didn't give him your location, he'd kill her slow." Cole's weapon was out, trained on Marcus. "You sold us out for family. Wouldn't you?" Marcus's eyes were haunted. "He's not just coming for Damien. He's coming for all of you. He has a team, 20 men minimum, all ex-military. They'll be here within the hour." Ivy appeared in the cabin doorway, Noah behind her, both sensing the tension. "What's happening?" "We need to leave," Damien said, his mind already shifting into tactical mode despite his desperate wish to stay in the peaceful fiction. "Right now." "There's no time." Marcus shook his head. "Graham planned this perfectly. He knew you'd run, so he's got teams covering every road out. You leave now, you drive right into them." "Then we stay and fight," Cole said. "Against 20 trained killers? In a cabin with a woman and child present?" Marcus's laugh was bitter. "That's not a fight. That's a massacre." Damien looked at the cabin, at Ivy standing in the doorway with their son, at the fragile life they'd started building. Then he looked at the forest, at the terrain he'd studied over the past week during his walks with Noah. "There's a third option," he said quietly. "Boop." The tunnel was old, probably built during Prohibition when these woods were full of smugglers and runners. Damien had found it 3 days ago while hiking with Noah, marked it mentally as an escape route without really believing he'd need it. Now he led Ivy and Noah through the narrow passage, their flashlights cutting weak beams through absolute darkness. "Where does this go?" Ivy asked, one arm around Noah to steady him. "About 2 miles northeast. Comes out near an old logging road." Damien kept his voice calm, but his mind was racing. "Cole and Marcus are setting up defenses at the cabin. They'll make Graham think we're still there, buy us time to get to the road." "And then what?" "Vincent's meeting us with a car. From there, we drive to the Canadian border. I have contacts who can get us across without documentation." You're talking about running forever. I'm talking about keeping you alive. Damien paused, turning to face her in the confined space. Graham won't stop, Ivy. Not until one of us is dead. And I won't let it be you or Noah. So it has to be you. Her eyes were bright with anger and fear. That's your plan? Draw him away from us and let him kill you? If that's what it takes. No. Ivy's voice was steel. We don't do that. We don't sacrifice people we love just to survive. That's Graham's way, not ours. Then what do you suggest? Because in about 45 minutes, a kill team is going to tear through that cabin looking for us. Noah tugged on Damien's sleeve. Daddy, I'm scared. The word, Daddy, still felt new, still carried weight. Damien crouched down, meeting his son's gray eyes. I know, buddy, but your mama and I are going to keep you safe, I promise. Like you kept us safe before? Noah's question was innocent, but it cut deep. When the bad men came? Yes, exactly like that. Okay. Noah's trust was absolute, terrifying in its simplicity. Then I'm not scared anymore. Ivy's hand found Damien's shoulder, squeezing once. We keep moving, but we do it together, all of us. No sacrifices, no heroes. We survive as a family or not at all. Damien nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in his throat, and they continued through the tunnel. They emerged in a grove of birch trees, the morning sun filtering through white bark and golden leaves. Vincent was waiting with an SUV, engine running, his expression tight with urgency. Cole just radioed, Vincent said as they climbed in. Graham's team hit the cabin 5 minutes ago. They're tearing it apart. Cole and Marcus? Got out through the back. They're heading to the rendezvous point. Vincent put the vehicle in gear, navigating the rough logging road with practiced skill. But Damien, there's something else. Graham didn't just bring a kill team. He brought explosives. Enough to level the whole area. He's trying to erase evidence, Damien said. Make sure there's nothing left to connect him to our deaths. More than that, Vincent handed back a phone showing a news alert. He's framing it as a terrorist attack. Anonymous tips to the FBI claiming you were running a separatist militia out of that cabin. When it explodes with you inside, the narrative becomes domestic terrorism instead of organized crime. Ivy read the alert over Damien's shoulder, her face paling. He's going to kill us and make us look like extremists, discredit everything we could testify to. That's Graham's specialty, rewriting reality to serve his purposes. Damien handed the phone back to Vincent. How long until the explosives go off? Unknown. Could be on a timer, could be remote detonation, could be... The explosion was visible even from 2 miles away, a pillar of fire and smoke rising above the tree line. The shockwave hit seconds later, rattling the SUV's windows, sending birds scattering into the sky. Noah pressed his face against Ivy's shoulder, and she held him tight, her eyes meeting Damien's with shared horror. That should have been us, she whispered. But it wasn't. Damien turned back to Vincent. Where are Cole and Marcus? 3 miles west. They made it out clean. Vincent's jaw was tight. But Graham's not done. He'll know we weren't in the blast. He'll adapt. Then so do we. Damien pulled out his own phone, scrolling through contacts he hadn't used in years. I have people who owe me favors. People Graham doesn't know about because I kept them separate from the organization. What kind of people? The kind who specialize in making problems disappear. Damien started making calls, his voice shifting into the cold, controlled tone he'd used for years as a crime boss. The tone he'd tried to leave behind but now needed one final time. Ivy listened to him work, watched him transform back into the man she'd run from, and felt something twist in her chest. This was the cost of loving someone like Damien. He could put on domesticity like a coat, but underneath was still the killer, still the tactician who calculated in lives and deaths. But maybe, she thought, that was what they needed right now. Not the man trying to be better, but the monster who knew how to win. The meeting point was an abandoned quarry 30 miles from the cabin, a crater in the earth filled with dark water and darker memories. 3 vehicles waited when Vincent arrived. Anonymous sedans with tinted windows and the kind of people inside who didn't ask questions. Cole and Marcus were already there, both armed, both watching the quarry's perimeter with the paranoia of men who knew they were being hunted. Damien stepped out of the SUV, leaving Ivy and Noah inside under Vincent's protection. He approached the lead vehicle, and a woman emerged, tall, Asian, with the kind of beauty that was carefully weaponized in eyes that had seen too much. Damien Cross. Her voice carried an accent he couldn't quite place. When you called, I thought maybe you were a ghost. Not yet, May. Damien offered his hand, and she shook it with a grip like steel wrapped in silk. Thanks for coming. You saved my brother's life in San Francisco. I told you, then I owed you a blood debt. May glanced at the other vehicles, where 6 men had emerged, all carrying the kind of weapons that weren't available at sporting goods stores. These are my people. They'll do what needs doing. What I need is Graham Maddox, dead or alive, I don't care which. The crime boss who's all over the news? May's eyebrow arched. The one they're saying orchestrated a terrorist attack? The one who actually orchestrated the murder of my wife and tried to kill my son? Damien's voice was flat. He's still out there, still hunting us. I need him stopped, permanently. May studied him for a long moment. This isn't business, is it? This is personal. Does it matter? It matters because personal makes people sloppy, makes them emotional. She crossed her arms. But it also makes them dangerous in ways professional killers can't match. So I'll ask once, are you doing this for revenge, or are you doing this to protect your family? Damien looked back at the SUV where Ivy sat with Noah, both of them watching through the window. His son's small hand was pressed against the glass, and even from here, Damien could see the fear in those gray eyes. Both, he said honestly. Graham took 3 years of my life, made me into something I'm trying not to be anymore, and now he's trying to take my future. So yes, it's revenge. But it's also survival, because as long as he's alive, my family will never be safe. May nodded slowly. Then we have the same goal. My people will help you hunt him. But Damien, when we find him, you need to be the one who ends it. Not for revenge, for closure, so you can move on. I don't know if I can move on from this. Then you better figure it out, because that woman and that child over there, they need you to be more than a killer. They need you to be a father and a husband, and you can't be both if you're still fighting Graham's ghost in your head. She was right, and Damien knew it. He'd spent 3 years as a ghost himself, haunting the spaces between violence and power. If he wanted to be real again, to be human, he needed to end this not with rage, but with purpose. Tell me your plan, May said. Graham's final stronghold was a warehouse district on the outskirts of Detroit, chosen for its proximity to Canada, and its maze of abandoned buildings perfect for hiding a small army. Sarah had tracked him there using the financial breadcrumbs he'd left, payments to shell companies, purchases of supplies, communications intercepts. He's in the central warehouse, Sarah reported over the encrypted channel. 16 men confirmed, possibly more. He's fortified but not impregnable. What about escape routes? Damien asked. He was studying schematics spread across the hood of a car, May and Cole flanking him. 3. 1 to the river, 1 to the rail yard, 1 underground to the sewer system. Sarah highlighted each on the digital map. We block those, he's trapped. He'll have contingencies for the contingencies, Cole warned. Graham always does. Then we give him a choice he can't contingency his way out of. Damien traced a route on the map. We don't go in guns blazing. We do this quiet, surgical, take his men out one by one until he's alone. Then we offer him a deal. What kind of deal? May asked. The kind where he confesses everything to the FBI in exchange for protective custody instead of a bullet. Damien looked up. I want him in prison, not a grave. I want him to spend the rest of his life knowing he lost. Cole was quiet for a moment. That's not the old Damien talking. No, it's the new one. Damien folded the map. The one who's trying to be someone his son won't be ashamed of. They moved at dusk, when the failing light turned the warehouse district into a landscape of shadows and rust. May's people were professionals, moving through the perimeter like ghosts, neutralizing Graham's sentries with silent efficiency. No shots fired, no alarms raised. Damien worked alongside them, rediscovering the muscle memory of violence he'd hoped to leave behind. But this time felt different. There was no rage fueling his movements, no cold satisfaction in each takedown. Just necessity, clinical and precise. They cleared the outer buildings in 20 minutes. Graham's remaining forces consolidated in the central warehouse, unaware they'd already lost the war. He knows we're coming, Cole said, watching the warehouse through binoculars. He's pulled everyone inside, fortified the main entrance. Good. Damien checked his weapon. Means he's scared. Scared people make mistakes, or desperate ones. Vincent appeared from the shadows, Marcus beside him. Both looked grim. Marcus confirmed Graham has a dead man's switch. If his heart stops, a signal goes out to 3 different news organizations with evidence implicating you in a dozen murders. Damien turned to Marcus. Your sister? Safe. May's people extracted her an hour ago. Marcus's voice was thick with gratitude and shame. I'm sorry, Damien, for all of it. You did what you had to do. I understand that now. Damien clasped his shoulder. But it means we can't kill Graham. We need him alive and willing to recant whatever he's prepared to release. That's a big ask for a man with nothing left to lose, Cole said. Then we give him something to lose. Damien pulled out his phone, dialing a number he'd memorized but never called. It rang twice before Graham answered. I was wondering when you'd call. Graham's voice was tired, older than Damien remembered. Come to gloat about your victory? Come to offer you a choice. Damien kept his tone even. Surrender now, confess everything to the FBI, and I'll make sure you get protective custody. A comfortable cell, guards who'll keep you breathing. And if I refuse? Then I come in there and drag you out, and I won't be gentle about it. Graham laughed, the sound hollow. You really think I'm afraid of you? I made you, Damien. I know every move you'll make before you make it. You knew the old me, the ghost you created when you killed Ivy. But I'm not him anymore. Damien looked back at the SUV in the distance, where Ivy and Noah waited under Vincent's protection. I'm someone new, someone you can't predict because I'm not playing by your rules anymore. Everyone plays by my rules eventually. Not this time. Damien ended the call and turned to his team. He's not surrendering. We go in hard and fast. May, take your people through the east entrance. Cole, you're with me on the west. Marcus and Vincent, cover the escape routes. No one gets out except Graham, and he comes out in cuffs or a body bag. They moved into position, the final pieces of a siege 3 years in the making. Damien felt the familiar pre-combat clarity settle over him, but underneath was something new, not rage or cold calculation, but determination. This wasn't about power or revenge anymore. It was about ending the cycle so his son could grow up without looking over his shoulder. The assault began with flashbangs and smoke, disorientation, and chaos. Graham's men fought back with desperate intensity, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. May's team moved like a scalpel through their defenses, while Cole and Damien pushed from the opposite side, driving them toward the center. Gunfire echoed through the warehouse, bullets sparking off metal and concrete. Damien took a round to his vest, the impact driving breath from his lungs, but he kept moving. He'd survived worse, and he had more riding on this than survival. They found Graham in the warehouse's central office, a glass-walled room overlooking the main floor. He stood alone, weapon in hand, watching his empire crumble around him. It's over, Graham, Damien called through the broken glass. Your men are down. Your escape routes are blocked. You've got nowhere left to run. I always have somewhere to run. Graham raised his weapon, but his hand was shaking. You taught me that. Always have a way out. That's not a way out. That's just suicide. Is there a difference? Graham's smile was bleak. I'm 73 years old, Damien. I built an empire from nothing, and you're tearing it down in a week. Whether I die here or in a prison cell doesn't matter. Either way, I've lost everything. You could have had a legacy, could have stepped back, retired, let the organization evolve. Damien lowered his own weapon. Instead, you tried to kill a pregnant woman and made me into a monster. Why? Because I saw what you were becoming. Graham's voice cracked. I saw you choosing her over the business, saw you going soft, getting weak. And I knew if I didn't stop it, you'd destroy everything we built. We didn't build anything, Graham. You built a machine that consumed people and turned them into tools. I was just the latest one. And now look at you, playing house with a woman who despises what you are, raising a child in a world that will eat him alive the moment you let your guard down. Graham shook his head. You think you can have both? The empire and the family? You'll end up losing both. Maybe, but at least I'll have tried. Damien took a step forward. Put down the gun, Graham. Let the FBI have you. Spend your last years in a cell instead of a grave. It's the only dignity left. For a moment, Graham seemed to consider it. His weapon lowered fractionally, his shoulders sagging under the weight of defeat. Then his eyes shifted past Damien, and his expression changed. No, he whispered. Damien turned to see Ivy standing in the warehouse entrance, Noah beside her, both of them staring at the carnage. I told Vincent to keep you in the car, Damien said, his voice tight with fear. Noah asked to see his father. Ivy's voice was steady despite the chaos. I couldn't tell him no. Graham raised his weapon again, but this time it wasn't pointed at Damien. It was pointed at Noah. Time fractured. Damien saw the calculation in Graham's eyes, the final desperate play of a man with nothing left to lose. He saw Graham's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the barrel align with his son's small form, and he moved. The distance between them vanished in a heartbeat. Damien slammed into Graham as the weapon discharged, the bullet going wild, punching through the office's glass wall. They hit the floor together, fighting for control of the gun. Graham fought with the strength of desperation, all technique abandoned for raw survival. But Damien fought with something stronger, the primal fury of a father protecting his child. He wrenched the weapon away and threw it aside, then grabbed Graham by the throat. You pointed a gun at my son, Damien said, his voice barely human. My 3-year-old son. He was leverage, Graham choked out. He's a child. Damien's hands tightened, Graham's face turning purple, and for a moment the old rage took over completely. It would be so easy to finish it, to squeeze until the struggling stopped, until the man who'd tried to destroy his family was nothing but a corpse. Daddy? Noah's small voice cut through the red haze. Damien looked up to see his son standing in the doorway, Ivy's hands on his shoulders, both of them watching with wide eyes. Don't kill him, Noah said quietly. Please. The words hit harder than any bullet. Damien looked at his son, at the fear and hope warring in those gray eyes, and felt the rage drain away like poison from a wound. He released Graham, letting the old man collapse gasping to the floor. Cole, Damien called without taking his eyes off Noah. Call the FBI. Tell them we have Graham Maddox ready for pickup. Cole moved to comply, and Damien crossed to his family. He knelt in front of Noah, taking his son's small hands in his own scarred ones. I didn't kill him, Damien said. I wanted to, but I didn't. Because you're right. We're not like him. Noah threw his arms around Damien's neck, and Ivy's hand found his shoulder, and for a moment the warehouse with its blood and broken glass faded away. There was only them. Only this moment. Only the family they'd fought so hard to protect. Behind them, Graham Maddox wept on the floor, broken and defeated, waiting for the sirens that would herald the end of his empire and the beginning of his final punishment. The trial took 6 months. Graham Maddox pleaded guilty to 37 counts including attempted murder, racketeering, and conspiracy. The dead man's switch turned out to be a bluff, one final attempt at control that crumbled under federal pressure. He was sentenced to life without parole. Damien testified along with Cole, Sarah, Vincent, and Marcus. They dismantled the organization piece by piece, exposing decades of corruption and violence. Some members went to prison. Others took the immunity deals and disappeared into witness protection. The empire Graham had built turned to dust, and Damien watched it happen with something like relief. They moved to Oregon after the trial, to a small town where nobody knew their faces or their history. Damien bought a house, not a mansion, not a fortress, just a house with a yard where Noah could play, and rooms enough for the family they were slowly becoming. Ivy opened a bookstore, something she'd always wanted to do but never had the chance. Damien helped renovate the space, learning carpentry alongside his son, teaching Noah to measure twice and cut once. It was quiet, normal, impossibly, wonderfully boring. Cole visited sometimes, along with Vincent and Marcus. They never talked about the old days, the violence, the empire. Instead, they grilled in the backyard while Noah played, and they talked about sports and weather and all the mundane things normal people discussed. Sarah sent postcards from wherever she'd disappeared to, each one signed with a single initial. Damien kept them in a drawer, reminders that some people survived by vanishing completely. 6 months after the move, Ivy found Damien in the garage late one night. He was building something from wood and nails, his hands moving with the same precision he'd once brought to violence. "What is that?" she asked. "A treehouse, for Noah's birthday." Damien set down his hammer. "I found plans online. Probably going to collapse the first time he climbs it, but I figured I should try." Ivy moved closer, studying the half-built structure. "It's good. Better than you think." "I don't know. I'm better at taking things apart than building them." "Then it's time to learn something new." She leaned against his workbench. "Noah asked me today when we're getting married." Damien looked up sharply. "What did you tell him?" "That we'd have to ask you." Ivy's smile was tentative. "So I'm asking, not for Noah, not for the story we tell people, for us. For real." Damien set down the wood he'd been holding. They'd been living together for 6 months, building a life from the ashes of the old one, but they'd never discussed making it official. The assumption had been there, unspoken, but neither had pushed for more. "I don't know if I'm ready to be a good husband," Damien said honestly. "I'm still figuring out how to be a good father. I'm not asking for perfect. I'm asking for trying." Ivy crossed to him, taking his hands. "We've been through hell together, been torn apart, and found our way back. I think we've earned the right to stop calling it temporary and admit we're choosing this. Choosing each other. Even knowing what I am, what I've done, especially knowing that, because I've also seen what you're becoming." She gestured to the treehouse. "A man who builds instead of destroys. A father who chooses his son over revenge. A person who's learning to be human again." Damien looked at their joined hands, at the calluses from honest work that were slowly replacing the scars from violence. "Yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you, if you're sure. If you can live with the fact that I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for the first half." "I can live with that." Ivy rose on her toes and kissed him, soft and certain. "As long as you understand I'm going to hold you to it." They married in the backyard 3 months later, a small ceremony with only the people who mattered. Noah was the ring bearer, taking his job with intense seriousness. Cole was the best man. Sarah sent flowers from wherever she was hiding. There was no reception, no grand celebration, just a quiet dinner with friends who'd become family, and later, after the guests had gone, Damien sat on the porch with his wife and son, watching the sunset paint the Oregon sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Daddy?" Noah climbed into his lap, small and warm and trusting. "Are we safe now?" Damien thought about Graham in his prison cell, about the organization scattered to the winds, about the empire reduced to evidence in federal archives. He thought about the enemies they'd made and the debts that might someday come due, but he also thought about the house they'd built, the life they were living, the choice he'd made to be more than what he'd been. "Yeah, buddy," he said, pulling his son close. "We're safe." Ivy's hand found his, their fingers lacing together in a gesture that had become familiar, comfortable, right. Above them, the first stars appeared in the deepening sky. In the distance, a car passed on the main road, its headlights cutting through the twilight. The world kept turning, full of dangers and uncertainties, but here on this porch with his family, Damien Cross felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wouldn't last forever. Peace never did. But for now, in this moment, it was enough. Noah fell asleep in his arms as the stars multiplied overhead, and Ivy leaned her head on Damien's shoulder, and together they sat in the gathering darkness, no longer running, no longer fighting, just living, just choosing, every day, to be more than ghosts, just being a family. And somewhere in the night, miles away in a federal prison, Graham Maddox stared at the ceiling of his cell and understood, finally, what he'd lost. Not an empire, not power, but the only thing that had ever really mattered. The traffic light in Damien's memory turned green, and he drove forward into a future earned through blood and choice and the simple revolutionary act of love. The end was also a beginning, and this time he wouldn't waste it.